Thank you for joining. We will be live shortly. Thank you all for joining us. Please enjoy the event.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Anna Wadia. I am a woman with light brown skin and shoulder length brown and gray hair wearing a maroon sweater. I'm the executive director of the Care for All with Respect and Equity Fund, or the CARE Fund. The CARE Fund is a unique collaboration among a diverse range of funders to invest at scale in movement building for an equitable care economy. We bring a holistic perspective to care and caregiving across the life cycle and across generations. Indeed, we believe that in order to address the deep legacies of oppression in this country, we need transformative change across the care economy. That means universal childcare and early education, paid family and medical leave for all, home care to enable people with disabilities and older adults to live independently with safety and dignity, and family supporting jobs for our essential care workers. We are therefore thrilled to sponsor today's event, to hear from the Century Foundation, several CARE Fund grantees, and other advocates about how states are doing across all of these care policies. We actually have a lot to celebrate. This has been a time of significant progress on both the state and federal level. Yet we have a very long way to go. The report's findings are alarming, though not surprising, and they confirm that this is the moment for philanthropy to step up and support organizations that are demanding bold action and public investment in care policies nationwide. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our MC for today's event, Julie Cashin.
Thanks, Anna. We so appreciate your vision, your leadership, your partnership and support. The CARE Fund wouldn't exist without you. This idea of bringing all of the care issues together under one roof and bringing the power of philanthropy into that is all your vision, and we so appreciate you. I'm Julie Cashin. I'm the Director of Women's Economic Justice and a Senior Fellow at the Century Foundation. For accessibility purposes, I am a white woman with tortoiseshell glasses and short brownish hair, wearing a black jacket and an orange Century Foundation background. The Century Foundation is a progressive think tank that conducts research, develops solutions, and drives policy change to make people's lives better. And we're so happy to be here with you at this event sponsored by the CARE Fund and presented by the Century Fund and Caring Across Generations. We're going to share with you the findings of our new CARE report card, hear from state leaders and elected officials about the importance of care policies. But before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. First, this event is being recorded and live streamed. And if you'd like to submit a question for our panelists or anyone speaking today, please do so using the chat feature. And to begin, we'll start with welcome remarks from Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Dad's Caucus founder, California Congressman Jimmy Gomez.
Hello, everyone. Governor Tim Walz here. Congratulations on the launch of your new state care policy report card. In Minnesota, we know just how important your work is. Our state has made critical investments in the care economy, from investing in childcare and our home care workers to establishing comprehensive paid leave and paid sick days. It took thousands of Minnesotans coming together, rolling up their sleeves, and putting in the work to make real progress in these vital areas. In Minnesota, we're committed to leading on care policy. And across the country, there are so many dedicated folks just like you working to do the very same thing. Like I said, that work is important. We should all be able to care for our families at every stage of life. Thank you for fighting for care, everyone, everywhere, because people deserve it. Have a wonderful event.
Hi, I'm Congressman Jimmy Gomez. Thank you for inviting me to talk about the importance of the care economy. We know that a strong economy is one that takes care of families. My mother, like many care workers, dedicated countless hours to provide physical and emotional support to those who needed it most. But she and my father had to work multiple jobs to make ends meet for my family. It's time that our care workers are treated with the respect they deserve and that families get the support they need. That means paid family leave, affordable childcare, and the enhanced child tax credit. As the founder of the Congressional Dad's Caucus, I'm working to ensure our nation invests in the care economy and its workers. I fought to expand access to paid leave in the California legislature long before I became a father. And I'm proud that we made progress in my home state. But it's past time we make progress across the country. We also need to invest in affordable childcare, and importantly, we need to invest in childcare providers. These are family policies, but they're also economic policies, because when families thrive, our economy thrives. With that, thank you for this invitation and have a great event.
Y'all, we are so lucky to have elected officials like Governor Walz and Congressman Gomez fighting for these care issues across the entire care infrastructure and the care economy on both the state and federal level. It's so important. And with that, I'm thrilled to introduce my colleague, Laura Valle Gutierrez, a fellow at the Century Foundation, and our partner in this project, Jamie Worker, the Director of Public Policy at Caring Across Generations. Jamie and Laura, take it away.
Thank you, Julie. Again, my name is Jamie Worker. I'm Director of Public Policy at Caring Across Generations. And Caring Across Generations is a national organization bringing together family caregivers, care workers, people with disabilities, and older adults, all working to transform the way that we care in this country so that care is accessible, affordable, and equitable. And our systems of care enable everyone to live, age, and work with dignity. We all have care in common. Each of us will need to provide or receive or need care at some point in our lives. And transformative investments in early childhood education and child care, aging and disability care, comprehensive paid family and medical leave, as well as paid sick and safe days are essential for our communities. We can ensure older adults and people with disabilities are able to live and age in their own homes and communities, that family caregivers have the support that they need, and care workers are treated with dignity and respect in good union jobs when we invest in equitable care policies. So we are thrilled to partner with the Century Foundation to get a clear picture of how states are doing across care issues. Our goals for this project were to highlight many of the states that are leading the way on care policies, while also defining solutions at the state and federal levels to demonstrate the critical nature of recent federal investments and also how recent executive actions can support equitable care policies as well. We wanted to make the case for why federal investments are needed to build and set the bar for what an equitable care infrastructure looks like. And we also wanted to provide communities with more tools to advocate and inspire more policymakers at all levels of government to take action for the care policies that every family needs and deserves. And we hope you'll use this data to talk to policymakers about what's needed to invest in care, the work that makes all other work possible. We hope you'll learn about the work happening in other states, what's worked and what hasn't. And we hope that each of you will continue to make the case for additional investments that are needed in care at every level of government so that states can effectively build and deliver what's needed for everyone to be able to live, age, and work with dignity. So with that, I'll turn it over to Laura to share more about what we found.
Thanks, Jamie, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Laura Valle Gutierrez. I'm a fellow at the Century Foundation. I am a woman with short brown hair and glasses, and I'm wearing a navy suit today. I will like to make sure we're getting the slides up. And before starting, I'd like to take a moment to thank my co-authors, Julie and Jamie, and also Kathy Mendez and Faith Jalango, all of whom supported the significant task of creating this report card. On our slides right now, you can see a map with the grades for this year's care report card. TCF released its first care report card back in 2021. However, the methodology, which I'm going to go over shortly, has been updated for this current report card, so direct comparisons should not be made. So I'm going to talk about how we graded each state, but I just want to mention that, we feel like the categories we scored states on are comprehensive and cover a wide range of care investments. So if a state were to earn an A, we would definitely consider them to be a leader in care infrastructure that's meeting the needs of their communities. That being said, we also know that we don't cover every single thing. And in particular, this report card is looking at state level data. So we know we may not account for some of the progress that's happening at local levels across the country. And we also know that due to data lags, recent state progress may not be showing up in our grading. However, we do discuss a lot of that local progress and recent policy wins in the text of our report. So we hope that you will dig deeper into the report after this event. Next slide, please. Here you can see the categories we scored states on. I'll delve a little bit deeper, but please see the methodology section if you have more questions on how we graded states. So to score state progress on childcare, we looked at affordability for families and states, whether states have a diverse supply of options, whether states offer credentialing support for early educators, and progress towards universal pre-K. For home and community-based services, we relied on a report by the AARP Policy Institute that covered outcomes like affordability and access to services, choice of setting and provider, safety and quality of services, support for family caregivers, and community integration of services like safe and affordable housing. For fair working conditions for care workers, we wanted to look at states' progress on making sure that care workers are paid wages that reflect the value of their work. So we looked at whether states have domestic workers' bills of rights, whether states support care worker unions through legislation, and whether care workers are paid a living wage. For paid family and medical leave, we looked at first whether the state has a paid family and medical leave law, and if so, they received additional points for covering all workers, having an inclusive definition of family, having broad eligible uses for leave, offering more than 12 weeks of benefits, having a progressive wage replacement structure, and we looked at more things, but for the sake of time, I'll move on. Similarly, for paid sick and safe days, we looked at questions of coverage, but we also looked at whether states provide workers with additional sick time in case of public health emergencies and whether they protect workers against retaliation for exercising their rights. Lastly, we also gave extra credit to states for fair work week laws that help give workers stability, input, and predictability into their work schedules. We also gave states extra credit for family supportive tax policies, and specifically for state child tax credits, earned income tax credits, and child and dependent care tax credits that are fully refundable and that are worth at least 25% of the federal version of these credits. And although there has been some really important federal progress on this front, we still give states extra credit for having their own state pregnant worker fairness laws. Next slide, please. So we graded every state and DC in our care report card. It is notable that no state earned an A, but as states continue to innovate and fight for care policies, as we have seen them do these past couple years, I am confident that we will be getting some A's in our next care report card. Across the categories, as you can see here, the highest scoring states were Oregon, Massachusetts, California, Colorado, and Minnesota. By contrast, the lowest scoring states were Alabama, West Virginia, Florida, Wyoming, and Idaho. Next slide, please. Many of the highest scoring states, including but not limited to the ones, I think back a slide actually, sorry. Many of the states that scored the highest have a wide array of care policies in place. They're also progressive in the way that these policies are implemented. For example, Colorado and Minnesota not only have paid family and medical leave, but they also have the most progressive paid family and medical leave policies in the US, earning credit for every single criteria that we were scoring states on. Oregon has a domestic workers' bill of rights, and they also support care workers' ability to unionize and have some of the highest median wages for both child care workers and direct care workers relative to the cost of living. Meanwhile, the lowest scoring states have few, if any, care policies in place. And where these states did receive credit, it was often for things like child care and home and community-based services, which are notably areas where there are also federal resources that support these policies. So with that, I will turn it back to Jamie to provide some more information on the policy solutions we talked about. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. And I think what is also important to note is that the fundamental shortcomings of our care infrastructure have existed for decades, but the COVID-19 pandemic really also exposed the huge barriers in our state and federal care infrastructure. And which was, a significant reason why the American Rescue Plan Act and its related investments was a major, but also it was meant to be a temporary answer to the ongoing need to build our country's care infrastructure in ways that truly meet the needs of every family. And it is that historic underinvestment in care that means that even those measures were not enough for any state to receive an A. And so in the following slide, wanted to note some of the federal policies that we continue to advocate for, because the care provisions in previous federal legislation, Build Back Better, would have been core to the long-term solution. While Congress successfully moved forward the climate and physical infrastructure provisions of Build Back Better, the care investments remain, largely unfinished business and things that we continue to advocate for. And many of the components of this Build Back Better agenda, as it relates to care, are embedded in these federal policies, which we continue to advocate for through the Care Can't Wait Coalition, a national coalition that's led by Caring Across Generation, includes paid leave, child care, care worker, family caregiver, and disability rights organizations. And we discuss each of these policies in our report. Next slide. We also discuss recent executive actions and federal rulemaking for equitable care policies that federal agencies have undertaken under the Biden administration. There have been many executive actions, including the historic executive order on care on increasing access to high quality care and supporting caregivers. And these and other subsequent federal rulemaking really give states the tools and also some incentives to improve their policies impacting aging and disability and childcare. And so while they don't, remove the need for robust federal funding, they do create a blueprint for the type of progress that's needed. So each of these are also discussed in our report. And despite tireless work from everyday people and grassroots organizations and advocates throughout the country, the combination of limited financial resources, deeply entrenched and well-funded opposition, and also the lack of political will have really blocked progress both at the federal and state level. And despite those things, many states have prevailed in many ways and made progress, thanks to the ongoing power building work of folks who are committed and impacted by these issues every day. And so just wanted to briefly highlight some of the types of state actions for early childhood education, paid leave, and also home and community-based care. On the next slide, it includes things like increasing funding for reimbursement rates for childcare to providers to improve access and affordability to childcare for families, increasing wages for childcare workers, and also support for high quality programs. Also supporting the stability of the childcare workforce by providing the benefits that workers and their families need to thrive, including health insurance, retirement contributions, and affordable childcare for their own families, paid sick time and paid family and medical leave, and supporting childcare workers to join and form unions with strong collective bargaining agreements. We also discussed the importance of developing and implementing a cost model that reflects the true cost of care, engaging parents, workers, and providers to assess what it would take to operate a high quality, culturally affirming childcare program with adequate staffing and resources, including living wages for childcare workers. As it relates to aging and disability care, in particular home and community-based care, on the next slide, these are services that help people with disabilities and older adults live and age with dignity. It also includes support for family caregivers. Next slide. Examples of those kinds of things include things like eating and dressing, moving around the home and preparing meals, shopping for day-to-day needs, even also what's needed for folks to participate in work and going to school. Investments here and things that states can do include increasing state investments in Medicaid reimbursement rates. The majority of long-term care, including home and community-based care, is funded by Medicaid, and directing a dedicated portion of this funding directly to pay increases for care workers. We'll hear from folks in Washington State, the first state to create a state-based long-term care public benefit program for those not eligible for Medicaid. And here too, it's also important to support the rights of direct care workers to form a union and establish a meaningful floor for wages and benefits. And lastly, on the next slides, we talk about some of the state actions for and important elements of paid family and medical leave and also paid sick and safe time. For paid family and medical leave is when you leave your job for several weeks or months, and while you're on leave, either the government or an insurance company may replace some or all of your paycheck. And right now, the U.S. has no federal paid family and medical leave policy. And on the next slide includes actions for states to incorporate when developing paid sick and safe time policies as well. These are short-term time off that workers can use when they're sick, and can include both serious conditions and also everyday health needs. And employees can also use earned sick days as safe time in some cases to be able to seek assistance or take safety measures in the case of things like domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking. So these are some of the policies that we have seen across the country as states take leadership on, and really excited now to turn it back over to Julie and hear from this incredible set of panelists we have.
Thank you, Jamie and Laura. This report was a labor of love, and as you heard, there were many of us involved in putting it together. And so again, thank you to all of the co-authors and for that great presentation. Now I have the great honor of being in conversation with some of our state leaders. So panelists should come on video now. I'm going to be talking to Jasmine Bowles, the Executive State Director at 9 to 5 Georgia, Andrea Serrano, Executive Director of Olay in New Mexico, Candace Vickers, Executive Director of Family Forward Oregon, and Maddie Fouch, Director of Public Affairs for SEIU 775 in Washington State. And what we're going to do is we're going to tell some of the stories of the recent care policy wins, talk about what goes into securing those big wins and what some of the challenges are that need to be overcome, and make the case for why state and federal investments are both necessary. So Andrea, I want to start with you. In New Mexico, you're the state that's the first one to pass a constitutional ballot amendment or a constitutional amendment on the ballot for early care and education. And I know this took years of organizing and hard work. So please tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. And again, my name is Andrea Serrano. She, her, ella are my pronouns. I'm broadcasting from my home and wearing a black top. And I think one of the things to keep in mind about the constitutional amendment, and one of the things that was so important to remember about it, is that this was a 12-year fight. And it took 10 years to get onto the ballot, or to get through the state legislature to get onto the ballot. So New Mexico is a state where if you want to do any changes to our constitution, it has to be by an election. And the only way to get on the ballot is by passing both the House and the Senate. We don't require the governor's signature to get something on. And so when this idea first was floated, it really was because New Mexico was steadily ranking between 48th and 50th in child well-being. We were steadily first to second in child hunger. We are a state that is 63% people of color majority. We're a state that has a huge land mass and not a ton of people, but we have a lot of land. And really, that's where the idea came from, is, New Mexico is not a poor state. We have actually one of the wealthiest land grant permanent funds in the country. And so this idea that we would keep children living in poverty was preposterous, but it took years of organizing the children who the families who started this fight. By the time we passed it, their kids were in high school. This was something that was really built from the ground up. It was a campaign that really was grown in New Mexico. It involved so many different types of groups and stakeholders. There were organizers up and down the state participating in this, but also, advocacy folks and tax experts and, policy experts, and all of us just working together. We passed with 70% of the vote in 2022, which our very popular Secretary of State won her race with 56% of the vote. So just to give sort of a measure there. And it passed almost every county in the state, even, regardless of political ideology. There were 4 counties that rejected the measure, but they're such small counties that it didn't really make a dent. And it was something to see it finally pass. We had one shot. By the time we got onto the ballot, we had one chance to pass this constitutional amendment, because we knew if we didn't, the state legislature would never give us another chance. And so to see it pass so successfully, I think, and then to see the way that families are immediately impacted, it makes the 12 years worth it. And implementation hasn't been the easiest road, but I am very happy to see that New Mexico is doing better on a report card for once. Not the grade we want yet, but I think when it comes to talking about care, that's actually something that resonates with so many communities across our state, and we've seen how important it is. So I think that's why this report card and this conversation is so vital.
Thank you so much. So some of the takeaways I just got from that are number one, rankings like this can actually help light a fire under people. So hearing that you're not, at the top could actually be helpful in advocacy, which I appreciate. Also patience, persistence, diverse coalitions, so many different parts to that story, and just really appreciate it. And we could probably talk about that for many more hours. So one of these days we'll have to do that. But for now, let's talk to Jasmine. Georgia is one of those states that maybe will get a little bit more motivated as a result of their D- on our report card. Can you share a little bit about your fight for paid leave, the incremental gains you've been focused on, and what are the biggest challenges that you find to making progress on care policy in Georgia?
Absolutely, Julie. Glad to be with you today. And for our friends who have accessibility needs, my name is Jasmine Bowles. I'm joining you from South Atlanta. Excuse me. I'm sitting in my home office, but I have a multicolored virtual background to represent 9 to 5, and I'm wearing tan glasses and an olive long sleeve shirt. So glad to be with you. And I think you're absolutely right. The D- for Georgia is disheartening, but not surprising. And I think as I share a little bit more today, it'd be great to think about these incremental gains we're making over, a 4-year span, just for some context. As we know, the care crisis and our country's response was really exacerbated during the pandemic and took center stage for all of us. So when it comes to solutions, it's important to note that Georgia is unable to coordinate like state or even local ballot measures due to some really limiting preemptions at the state level. So for us to do ballot initiatives would require a constitutional amendment, and our methods right now are handled purely through the General Assembly. So when I think about what we've been able to accomplish with the state legislature, in 2021, 9 to 5 founded and launched, we became the anchor organization, if you will, for the Georgia Coalition for Paid Leave. So when we created that in 2021, that same year, we helped pass Georgia's first paid leave bill. And what that did was it gave 3 weeks of paid parental leave to state and public employees due to the birth of a new child, an adoption, or even a foster care placement. Now, you and I know that 3 weeks is not nearly enough. And so we knew we'd be back and that was just the starting point. We started to introduce comprehensive paid leave discussions around 2022. In 2023, we focused on a paid sick leave bill for family care. And what that does is it allows private sector workers who are already earning sick leave to use up to 5 of those days to care for another family member. And so that was another small win. The thing is, there was a sunset provision, which means that, after just a few years, we'd have to keep advocating for the bill to be renewed. So last year, we were able to get the sunset provision removed. And now that bill is permanent here in Georgia for all of Georgia's workers. Which brings us to this year. This year, our coalition really focused on expanding that 2021 3-week bill. And what we've been able to do is support a bill that now doubles that leave from 3 weeks to 6 weeks. Now, we know that still falls short of what we all want in our deepest hearts, which is, a minimum of 12 weeks for every American. So all that to say, this is still a really important small step. We also were able to include a notification requirement because, believe it or not, there are Georgians who have this right and don't even know it. And some of those folks are teachers. And so due to this notification requirement, we've been able to mandate that employers let their employees know that this even exists. And as I close out, if I had to think about one of our biggest challenges, I regret to say that, the climate and partisanship, the polarity that we find when it comes to getting things done, we know that this is an issue that affects everyone across lines of difference. And so we want to keep lifting that, as all Georgians deserve this. So thank you again, Julie, for the question. Pass it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Jasmine. And I think, we were pretty hard graders, right? We're dreaming big. We want to see big changes. We want care policy that really supports everyone. And it's important to acknowledge that there are places where political realities mean incremental wins are big wins. And I think, just so much credit to you all for the way that you've been thinking about it and the way that you're making, change year after year that ultimately is looking toward that big picture vision, but really making the changes that you can make today that are really going to have an impact on people's lives now. So I appreciate that perspective and all of that work. Let's turn to Maddie. Maddie is in Washington State, where they have paid family and medical leave. They have paid sick and safe days. And Washington is the only state in the nation right now that has a long-term care policy in place. Now, that's a hot topic at the moment. And so, Maddie, I'd love to hear about the fight that won that policy and what's at stake for that program right now.
Great. Thanks so much, Julie. It's wonderful to be here. As Julie said, my name is Maddie. I use she, her pronouns, and I am sitting in my office in front of a blurred background, which is hiding the messiness. I'm wearing a black shirt and a jean jacket. And it is just so exciting to be here on a Powerhouse panel talking about care. Washington State, we do have a lot of wonderful care policies, and we are making a lot of progress. We scored a solid B- on this report card, which we're proud of. And one of the things that we're most proud of is the Washington Cares long-term care benefit, which is the only near universal public long-term care benefit anywhere in the country right now. And the path to passing this legislation, it was almost a decade long and involved years of public organizing, community organizing, governmental education, engagement with legislators and coalition partners. We really had to build a very large and powerful, broad, diverse coalition that was advocating for this policy. We were simultaneously sort of building and growing an excellent Medicaid long-term care system in Washington State and having a very strong home and community-based system in Washington to build upon was really critical for this win. And then it also took years and years of policy and actuarial development and research to really come up with this groundbreaking and new program and policy to deliver a new benefit. And the fight really didn't end when the policy passed in 2019. We spent the last 5 years continuing to work to defend the program from attacks, to strengthen the benefit, to expand it to broader populations, and then working to ensure strong implementation, because I'm sure as everyone on this call knows, implementation is really the groundwork to making sure that the programs and the policies that we develop actually work for people and work for working people. And so then it turns out being first in the nation means there's a lot to figure out in developing a new policy. So after all of that, in the past 5 years, we are now, this brand new benefit is under an extreme attack by an anti-tax multimillionaire who spent $6 million of his own dollars to place a ballot initiative on the November ballot to take away this long-term care benefit from millions of Washingtonians. And, what's at stake here is we're trying to develop and have created this policy to really get care to people who need it. Many of us don't realize, but the need for long-term care is really unpredictable, but it's also unavoidable. The reality is that, 70% of us will need help with daily living activities like bathing, toileting, dressing, other mobility. And that can happen really at any age, and it especially happens as we age. Most of us do not have a way to pay for something like home care, home modifications, medical equipment. And long-term care expenses are not covered by Medicare. They're not covered by traditional health insurance. And private long-term care insurance is largely unaffordable. Premiums rise year after year, even on retirees with fixed incomes. It's unreliable with claims, routinely being denied, and it's often completely inaccessible to anyone with pre-existing conditions. So the reality of our current long-term care system across the country is that people are expected to pay out of pocket, spend down into poverty to access Medicaid benefits, or just go without. And so that was the problem, the policy problem we wanted to solve with this Washington Cares benefit. We were so excited that in July of last year, the benefit really launched. More than 3 million workers in Washington began building benefits. And in 2026 is when those first benefits will start being delivered out. And, I think really what's at stake is in the short term, defending against this ballot initiative. We are putting everything into growing, continuing our big coalition effort to fight back. We're hoping that everyone will sort of join hands and really, take a stand, because we believe what we're doing here in Washington has the opportunity to be expanded across the country because, as I said, over 70% of us will need long-term care at some point.
Thanks, Maddie. It is such an important point, that passing a policy is step one, and then there's implementation, and then there's also fighting against efforts to stop the policy from being reality. And so, these are long fights that we are all fighting sort of along the way, on an ongoing basis, even after the moment of winning. Winning is just the first step. So appreciate all of the work that you're doing to maintain this benefit that, is there to support so many people, and is really a model for the nation to learn from. So speaking of models, Candace, Oregon is the only state in the nation to receive a B+, the highest scoring. And that is right. Oregon's paid family and medical leave, paid sick days, domestic workers bill of rights. So what has helped to make Oregon a leader? Would love to hear more from you about that.
Thank you, Julie. And as Julie said, my name is Candace Vickers. My pronouns are she and her. I have caramel skin and black hair, and I'm wearing black glasses with a green shirt and a black jacket. And I'm sitting in my office with a word map of our organization's values behind me and a picture of Gloria Steinem and Angela Davis. I think, I really want to highlight 3 factors with regard to our amazing grade, which also could be better. And one is that, we have worked really hard to center and uplift the voices of moms and caregivers in this fight for all of our policy wins. These are the folks who have been historically under and unpaid members of our economic wealth, and they have often gone unseen. In our unique transformational organizing model, we really work to make multilingual spaces for advocacy and organizing, and to make those spaces where not only our moms and caregivers are present, but so are our community leaders and our governmental electeds. We also work to create spaces where those moms and caregivers can actualize their agency in the fight. So making sure that we're equipping them with the tools to continue these conversations in really diverse spaces. And we articulate those connections between Oregonians from really diverse backgrounds, including urban, rural, gender, and racial identities, and how they have really shared interests in furthering the success of the care economy. The second thing I would say is we really work hard to cultivate care champions at every single level of government. We work hard around voter and elected education to make sure that they understand the intersectional aspects of care and how they relate to other racial, gender, and economic justice issues. And then the last piece that I'll highlight in that part is that we really work to build coalition. We are the organization that founded and led Fair Shot, which is a multi-issue progressive coalition that can really tackle all of the issues that are often seen as peripheral to care. And we founded and we currently lead the Child Care for Oregon Coalition. This is a really unique coalition. It consists of multiracial organizations, 20 of which that are local, community-based, and culturally specific. It includes partners like Imagine Black, Apano, and Pacoon, just to name a few. What I'll say is what we know is that when we work together, when we work in community and when we work in coalition, we have big wins. We have paid family, medical, and safe leave for all Oregonians. And that means that a lot of these folks get access to 12 to 14 weeks of paid leave. We also expanded the definition of family to be inclusive of our LGBTQ plus families, multi-generational families, and families of affinity. And we also include safe leave to make sure that there's leave for victims of domestic violence. We have invested millions in capacity building for childcare providers by working with our agencies around the state and around our city to make sure that our care workers can invest in their small businesses as they work to address our childcare deserts. We know that those home-based and small centers are culturally and linguistically responsive, and those are the ones that families really want to have their babies at. And we also work to pass preschool for all in Multnomah County, which is our largest county. This ensures that all 3- and 4-year-olds in Multnomah County have access to early learning that is chosen by their families and that is supported by our city. We also have paid sick time, equal pay, protections for workers, including those who are pregnant and nursing. And we're currently working to make progress on mental health, racial justice, immigrant justice, and reproductive health issues. I want to share a couple of recent examples. One has been advocating for our employment-related daycare subsidy program. This helps low-income families and families in need pay for their childcare expenses. We know that childcare here can cost as much, if not more, than the cost of rent. And we expanded the eligibility for this program to make sure that more families could benefit. This includes students, whether or not they're working, people who are at risk of houselessness, domestic violence victims, and families at risk of disruption in their unity or engagement with the foster care system. This huge win was only made possible by the advocacy of those voices of mothers and caregivers that we work to uplift. It's not us. Right? It's the moms and the caregivers who show up in the rain, because you know it's rainy here, and make sure that their voices are loud. And without the funds that we need to make sure that the care economy is successful, it's just an empty promise. So we've worked really hard to make sure that our government is working to fund these programs. In the beginning, when we started this journey with ERDC, family co-pays were sometimes 30% of their monthly income. That's a lot. That's a lot more than many people's mortgage, right? Now it's down to less than $8 a month for those families. This was huge. Considering the stories that we've heard from parents who used to have to put these on their credit cards, and many families who have told us that they've had to make the hard choice between paying for childcare and paying for rent, which further exacerbates our houselessness problem here, this copay change has been really monumental. Most recently, just to finish up, last month, we successfully won in a short session. Oregon has a short session every other year of only 35 days. And during that short session, we successfully won $171.2 million to ensure that 16,000 families here in Oregon continue to participate in ERDC and get to be able to access those resources. But still, we have 2,800 families on a wait list. and it's growing. So even though we have these big wins, we know that there's more to be won. We are laser focused on every tool at our disposal here. And the biggest tool that we have is elevating the voices of our moms and caregivers so that we can get to our ultimate goal here in Oregon, which is universal childcare for all income earners, regardless of your zip code here in our state. So we've got a lot of wins, and I think those wins point to parts of the reasons why, after reading the report, we got that B+. And I won't be happy, Julie, until we got that A+. I'm a summa
Absolutely.
cum laude type of guy, right?
That's
We're
right.
headed
That's
there.
right. I'm tempted to just kind of drop the mic and be done now, but I have a few more questions. So I'm going to ask a few more and then go to some audience questions too. But thank you for that. And I think one of the things I really appreciated is you painted the picture for us of what all of these policies actually mean to people's lives, how much better people's lives are when these policies are in place. And that's just such an important, crucial, like that is the part of the conversation that matters the most. So yeah, with that, I want to ask Jasmine, especially here you are making some progress in the state, but not as much as you want. Can you talk a little bit about the role of the federal government and kind of how you think about how the state plays a role and what is important about having a federal role too?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so grateful for spaces like this where I get to gain inspiration from colleagues doing this work all over the country. So Maddie, Andrea, Candace, I will definitely be bringing so much of what we've talked about today with me onward into the fight. But also this discussion makes it clear why we need federal solutions, right? No one American is more or less valuable than another. And with support from the federal government to say, hey, we value national paid leave, that would really help all of America. I will also say, I know the report is fresh, but I was really struck by the map at the start of our call. And we can't ignore the line, right, between the North and the South, and in some cases, the East and the West. And those inequities are palpable in our people. And so goes the South, so goes America, right? And so if we want to do right by our citizens, we really need a national paid leave program so that Georgians can benefit, so that Oregonians can benefit, so that New Mexicans can benefit. And ultimately, no one state should have to build this program brick by brick. And so a national paid leave program, I think, would go a really long way. So right now we're pushing for things like the Family Act and other federal paid leave policies. So when you think about the Family Act, workers would be able to take paid leave in order to see about themselves if they have a serious health condition, or to care for a family member, or to bond with a new child, like a newborn, an adopted child, or even a foster child, not to mention those who are impacted by military deployments. So bills like this help all of us. And so I leave with some optimism balanced with some righteous frustration about the path forward here in Georgia, but the federal government could do a lot to help us all.
Thanks, Jasmine. I agree. And I want to grab a question from the audience. One that's come in is, how do you view the role of the direct care worker force or direct care workers in this ecosystem of care? And Maddie, you are coming to us from SEIU. You're thinking a lot about the workforce. Can you answer that question for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the role of direct care workers in care and care infrastructure is foundational. It's who is doing the work every single day. And we know, nationally, and this is the same in Washington, D.C., that the caregiving workforce is overwhelmingly women. It's disproportionately Black women, Indigenous women, and women of color and immigrants. And at SEIU 775, our members largely are providing care for Medicaid, LTSS, long-term services and supports clients who are also low-income seniors and people with disabilities. And, this workforce, if caregivers are not able to care for themselves, to provide for themselves and their families, providing care for our elders, people with disabilities, our children, it is much, much harder. And, in Washington State, we, particularly looking at the home and community-based services sector, being able to have a unionized workforce and have a voice at the job, a voice at the bargaining table, a big advocacy arm in public financing has made a huge difference for the direct care workforce. Since our founding in 2002, home care workers have more than doubled wages. Starting wages in Washington State are over $21 an hour. There's affordable health care, benefits, paid training, other benefits like paid time off and L&I. And the fact is that the direct care workforce across the country deserves these benefits and to have a living wage because it is foundational. It's foundational to how we have care. And a key part of that is, being able to form a union. And because of our, the historical racist labor laws in this country, many direct care workers are actually prohibited from forming unions. And that has happened state by state and industry by industry. And so that's a huge opportunity for change that I think at the federal level could change.
Absolutely. Thank you. We had another question come in asking about kind of what's the overlap among child care, disability, elder care, like where do we see the overlaps there and how can kind of those different sectors support each other? I wonder, Candace, do you want to take that one?
Absolutely. Thank you, Julie. And again, this is Candace. And, I would say what we say often is care is the work that makes all other work possible. And care is the thing that we will all need to access at some point in our lives, whether it's childcare, home care, rehabilitative care after an illness or an injury. And the shared interests of those worker groups is that they care about us. And they care about us often selflessly and often invisibly. Their interests are always in the betterment of us, our children, our parents, and that's the overlap, I think, Julie. It's the space where those folks are constantly coming together to think about someone else. Unlike, their own bank accounts and their own growth, they're constantly thinking about how can they lift up the other sectors of our society. And we will all have to engage with those care folks at some point.
And I think that also speaks to the fact that we need more of them in Congress and in state legislatures, right? We
Absolutely.
need more people who have the experience of care, who come at this with the values of caregivers. So I think
and Julie, that's been one of our major wins is, we have had folks who have served on our board, who have gone through our leadership development process and who are now state legislators who are now helping us win some of these big wins that we have. And we have a care champion in Congress and Congresswoman Bonamici. And that's really a big part of our work in lifting up the voices so that they can then actualize their agency in these spaces of power that have traditionally not wanted our voices to be heard.
Thank you. We need to start wrapping up. So I want to ask Andrea our last question. What gives you hope and optimism when we're thinking about care policy?
The fact that that's something that actually resonates with people. I think what's being said here resonates more than sometimes we think, or it can be very discouraging when policymakers don't value care, but it's knowing that our communities, they understand care, because to the point that Candace just made, we all need it at some point. And so I can't say this enough, that the more we're talking about care as a practical need for every single person in this country, and really lifting up the value of caregivers, of care work, of this care economy. What gives me hope is knowing that, folks who don't even think about care or who don't think they'll ever need care still understand that other folks do. So it's to continue pushing on policymakers to be aligned with what folks are saying. I think voters in New Mexico are perfect example of that. If 70% of the electorate supported this, we're onto something here. So I think it's to that continued push is absolutely what gives me hope.
I love that. That is a great way to end the panel. I'm going to ask you all to stay on for Anna and Laura and Jamie, if you're able to come back onto the screen as I close us out, just to be in community with all of our amazing speakers. So just want to first say that you should know more about all of these amazing women who've been speaking, and to learn more about them, all of their bios are on the event website. So please check that out. I would love to have this conversation go on for hours and hours, so we'll plan that for another time. Thank you to everyone who attended today, to the Century Foundation, our events team, to Caring Across Generations, our amazing partner in this work, to all of our speakers, panelists, the governor representative, to the Care Fund for sponsoring us. And so, a recording of this event will be available immediately on tcf.org, so you can watch it again and again, share it with your friends. Let's keep up the conversation so that we can make sure that we continue to build on these grades, that, we want to get to a place where America gets an A+ for care. We are not there yet. We have a long way to go, but with the amazing people in this room, in this Zoom room, and in the audience working toward it, I believe we can do it. Thank you so much.